Welcome to the post-tournament edition of Preps Plus Extra. How you doing? I'm Mark Stewart, prep editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. With me, as always, J.R. Radcliffe, fresh off the tournament experience.
Yep.
How you doing this week?
Doing good. Drove back from Green Bay. We saw Oak Creek shoot 67% in the state championship game and win their first Division I state girls basketball championship. Very exciting weekend. Once again, as with the boys, girls teams were well represented from the Milwaukee area. You saw Kettle, Moraine, Lutheran win in the lowest scoring championship game in tournament history to take the Division III title. Pius was up there as well. They got eliminated. Heritage Christian eliminated in the semifinals, but and McGuanago eliminated in the semifinals in D1. But very busy weekend for Milwaukee area prep hoops fans once again.
Yeah, and you touched on Oak Creek, and all year this has sort of been kind of what, in a way what people have kind of expected of Oak Creek, with Stephanie Kostowitz and Tamia Sims, two D1 players, 6'2" D1 players, by the way, and then you got Katie Finn, who is going to Division II. I think William Jewell. I mean, so three players of that caliber on the same team already gives you a leg up, and then when they were finally able to kind of get over the hump of winning some of those close games. They had two really tight losses early to mid-season, and I think down the stretch that was one of the points Coach Steve Haluknik was kind of working with the team to kind of get over the hump in those situations, and obviously they did. Yeah, with a great semifinal win over Kimberly, a team that had been one of those two that beat them earlier in the year by 1 point. They get a couple. They got a good call late. There was a call that could have gone either way, I think. But more importantly, Oak Creek made some really nice plays late in the game. An inbound under the hoop to Kostowitz with like a second left on the clock. She banks in a shot to tie the game, force overtime, and then Oak Creek takes over from there. Kimberly was a great team. That really should have been the championship game, I think. Second weekend in a row, I feel like we've had a matchup worthy of being a championship game in Division I anyway. That wound up being one of the semifinals. But that's the way it bounced, and Oak Creek was able to get on through and then showed up at the championship game big time. Yeah, and this kind of brings back, we didn't talk about seeding tournaments or reseeding tournaments, but this would be, these would be good examples that definitely, where at least you say, I know the WIA in high school sports, they don't want to say, oh, you're the lowest seeded team and you get to stay, but you can see at the top. If you're going to have, just a semifinal and a final in all divisions, you could easily at least split the teams that everyone considers the top two, apart, and then, at least those teams get. And that's all you need to do with a 14 bracket is split the two apart. Right. I think, too, it's funny because boys volleyball went to that model, I think, a couple years ago where they started reseeding at the state tournament with 8 teams qualifying. And I thought that might sort of be a springboard into other sports, or at least the investigation of the possibility. It seems like we haven't really talked about that. Now, though, like you said, after this year, especially in the boys and girls tournaments in Division I wonder if we'll see a little more discussion about maybe this is still a good thing when we get to the state tournament level. Yeah, and the one advantage, obviously, boys volleyball has is that, or at least that's what we were told that they have, is that they, those teams, a lot of them play each other in the regular season. So there's a lot to compare, right? Yeah, so there's a lot to compare versus comparing Superior versus Oak Creek, which, maybe geographically, I don't know how far, how much farther you can get. But if you leave it up to the coaches, you could still come up with a model that's more fair or just as fair as the model right now, whereas it's just a random draw. On a rotating basis, you might face the second best team in the state as the best team in the state in the semifinal, and I've always felt, because the silver ball is given to the second place finisher, which is a heck of an accomplishment, I've always felt it would be nice to have that go to a team that you could easily say is the second best team, and I just think time and time again we're not getting that. Yeah, and then shifting to Division III, Kettle Moraine Lutheran won its first WIAA state title, and gave the Walls family, Jason Walls and Ryan Walls, the unique experience. Ryan Walls is the coach, the boys coach at Wisconsin Lutheran. They obviously won the Division II title on the boys side. The following week, Jason takes his team up there, and they get their first girls championship in really two different games. The first game they really came out on fire, and they were shooting, I think I had them like 13 for their first 16 shots in the semifinals. And then, I don't think they had 13 baskets for, for the lowest scoring title game, the lowest scoring tournament game, period. Yep. In history. But hey, the bottom line is, hey, you got to win the game, and years from now, that gold ball isn't gonna, no one's gonna say that was a low scoring game.
Right, no one will remember the score. At least they won't care.
Yeah, right. So congratulations to to the Chargers as well. But we're talking, seeding and all this other stuff. But there are hotter topics out there.
There's lots of topics out there.
As far as the WIA goes. And last week we kind of, gave a slight preview of, talking about this multiplier proposal that came out of the Six Rivers Conference that will be discussed at the annual meeting next month. And basically the plan is that, or their proposal is that for every private school team and all the different WIA sports would have a multiplier of 1.65 added or multiplied rather to its enrollment. So if you got a school of 500 students, then you have 500 times 1.65. And I think it comes out to, I don't have my calculator here, but I think it's over.
You backed yourself into the corner on the math problem. You should have come up with something a little easier.
Yes, I know. But in essence, it bumps you up pretty significantly, and it's created a lot of discussion. I know I heard some talk up at the state tournament. What's some of the feedback you've been hearing from people so far?
Well, obviously, it's a very split issue. If you're from a small public school trying to compete with the Dominicans, the La Crosse Aquinas, the Racine St. Catharines of the world in boys basketball, you feel like you are at a disadvantage because you don't have the luxury, A, of being able to draw from a wide geographic area as private schools do, and at the same time, it's spread out enough in your part of the state where you're not even getting public school kids transferring in. I think in Milwaukee, it's easy for us to say, well, there's no difference between a private and a public school because I can transfer to any school I want before my sophomore year. So you're seeing a lot of kids jump, and we talked about how transfers have had a big influence on some of the top programs in the state, public or private school. Right. So it seems like a non-issue in Milwaukee now, but for a team in the rural part of the state competing against a small school in an urban area, you could see why they feel disadvantaged. Obviously, private schools are not for this. They feel that it's way too broad a brush to paint every single private school in the state. And you touched on it in one of your articles. Dominican basketball is kind of the best example right now, 3-time state champion in Division IV, one of the best recruits in the nation. At the same time, their football program isn't dominating anybody. They have lots of other sports programs that don't look like they have an inherent advantage competing in Division IV. And right. I think you could say that about a lot of schools, not just individual programs, but you can't say that just because Martin Luther, Milwaukee Lutheran, or Kettle Moraine Lutheran, because they're private schools, that they're going to dominate across the board, because that hasn't happened. Even in sports like, say, cross country, where one or two kids can make a difference. Now, there's the case in basketball where we have Diamond Stone and Dominican, and right now I think it's easy to look at that and say, look, I'm from another part of the state. I'm a D4 school. How am I supposed to compete with a Milwaukee area school that can bring in all these other kids?
Right, yeah, and I think it is sort of a, I won't say, I think it's just too simplistic of an answer,
agree.
Because, I spoke with one of the, one of the principals in the Six Rivers Conference who was really kind of behind, this proposal. And talking to him, I mean, it's good to talk to people because sometimes you see the proposal and you think, this
is what they're thinking.
This is, you just kind of think, bad thoughts or just like, what the heck is he thinking or how can he think this way? And then you talk to the person and, you kind of get a sense for where they're coming from and that, they genuinely feel that something needs to be done with this. But I just think it's too simplistic of an answer for some of the reasons you talked about in terms of not every sport every school is going to have a dominant sport. And I do think it's too basketball oriented. I think I kind of chuckled at the coincidence that this kind of came out, right before the boys, at the height of the tournament season for basketball, because it seems like if you took basketball out of the equation, I don't think there would be so much, concern about, right. School size. But, basketball is everyone's baby and everyone loves that Hoosier story. Course, and everyone, and up until 10 years ago or 14 years ago when private schools entered the WIA, you had those small towns getting, a chance to win championships and it's something that, they were really hanging their hat on. And,
right.
and now, it just doesn't happen because, most of these, most of the
right.
Of the Dominicans of the world. But I really think it's more of I don't think it's a public-private thing as much as it's
totally
an urban, rural type, issue. And maybe I'd be interested to, see the rural urban numbers in terms of state tournament participation and championships.
Yeah, and one of the reasons they opened up a 5th division in basketball was to create more opportunities for some of these schools. And it is true that if you look at Aquinas, Dominican, Racine, St. Catherine, those 3 schools have won at least 1 state championship since 2003 in boys basketball. So I can see the argument, hey, we're blocked by this small subset of programs that are in our way. But at the same time, I think you look at Randolph, which has, I think, 8 state titles since that merger you're talking about. That's a public school, small, Division 5. I think the question is, what is the real problem? Is the problem that a select few are blocking the many from an opportunity at winning more state championships? And if that's the case, then they need to look, I think, more at a success-based multiplier, which is a model being adopted in some states like Illinois, where they look at, okay, your track record as a program, not as a school necessarily, public or private, but as a program is really, really good. And for whatever reason, you seem to have an advantage, you should move up a division or 2 divisions or whatever it may be. There's got to be a system there that addresses the heart of the problem, which isn't private schools have an advantage. It's that there's a couple schools that doesn't matter what they're doing. And we can argue about whether or not that's a good thing, but they're preventing the vast majority of other teams in the state from having a fair shake. We need to do something that bumps them up against competition that's more worthy of them.
Yeah, okay, and final point here real quick. Do you think this passes in the middle of next month when it goes to the board?
I think it does. There's a ton of private schools out there, or I should say a ton of small schools out there, and remember, every school gets 1 vote, so if it's going to take some networking, but outside of the Milwaukee area and maybe the Madison area, I think you're going to have a lot of schools that are in agreement this is a good thing. I hope it doesn't pass. I don't like it, but I do think that it's going to have some traction.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm on the other side. I'm going to believe that common sense is going to prevail here. And what maybe happens is that maybe this elicits more discussion, because I just think the plan that's here now is just not the right plan. Maybe something needs to be put in place, and maybe it just needs to be discussed. But I just can't see this passing because it just is just too simple of an answer to the problem. But we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, we could talk about this for another 10 minutes. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Preps Plus Extra. For more Preps Plus action, be sure to watch me and Lance Allen every Sunday night on TMJ4. Take care.